Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So today I'm going to make this very brief. I'm going to discuss film adaptations. That is, film adaptations made from novels, adapted from novels. There have been, of course, many films since really the beginning of film and beginning of cinema since 1895 where film adaptations were made from novels. Wizard of Oz was one of the earliest ones from the 1910s, of course, Frankenstein in 1910, and its various versions, not to mention, of course, Wizard of Oz, and so on and so forth. So, what I think people tend to forget about film adaptations is that it is an adaptation of a work. That means it's going to be changed or modified in some way from the original source. It is not meant to be a literal translation of the book, because if that's the case, then what you should do is just read the book. A film can take the events from a book and they have to be applied to a screenplay. They have to be adapted. So you're going to make changes. Now it depends on what the changes are, of course, but in the long run, it's also about a director who may have a certain vision, if not even or a screenwriter. I bring this up because Gone Girl, the book itself, the author of that book wrote the screenplay to the movie, and this is very rare. It almost never happens because, as Entertainment Weekly had pointed out, which was a brief article about this, authors are not very good at writing screenplays. That's not what they do, because it's a certain kind of an art. It's a certain kind of a way of doing things. And when you think back to the most obvious example to me would be Stanley Kubrick. He adapted Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita. And originally he had worked with Nabokov, and I believe Nabokov even wrote a screenplay treatment. But at the end of the day, it was Kubrick who took it and made it into his own vision of what that book was. Plus, also consider that when the film version came out, which was in 1962 or 1963, at that time, there were the Hollywood censors were very adamant about certain things that you could not show, particularly from that book. Not to mention the fact that Sue Lyon, who played Lolita, they increased her age a little bit, so it wasn't really the, I believe, 12 or 13-year-old as depicted in the novel. And Stanley Kubrick did the same thing with The Shining. Now, of course, that was Stephen King, in fact, did write a screenplay adaptation, and from what I understand, it wasn't really very good, and so Kubrick took it and gave it to a Gothic novelist to adapt it into something else entirely. Now, The Shining might be one of the best examples, because here's Stanley Kubrick with his own ideas on horror. He didn't want to really just make a horror film. He wanted to make a film that explored the themes that that Stephen King dealt with, and expand them into something other than just what was in the novel. And so, I mean, well, I'm sure most of you realize what the film is. It's almost an epic horror film, as opposed to the novel that Stephen King wrote. So sometimes you look for deeper themes. You cut a little deeper if you're a good screenwriter. You aim for things that are not present in the book, or maybe were implied. And so it's not to say, of course, that this always works in everyone's favor. But there are exceptions to the rule. Gone with the Wind, I think most people would say that was a fairly good adaptation of the novel. James Bond. A lot of those films, of course, were adapted from Ian Fleming's novels. The Exorcist, which is an interesting one because there are, in fact, things that are in the book of The Exorcist that are not in the film version. Namely, one in particular is Ellen Burstyn's Regan McNeil character, who at the end of the novel says, "I don't know what it is that I just saw, but I think I truly believe in the devil. But I don't know if I ever believed in God." In the novel, it's kind of expressed a little more deeply the fact that she is an atheist. So it's interesting what's left out sometimes, and then what they leave in, as far as a cinematic adaptation of a book. The Exorcist is, of course, very scary reading as well. So, um, but things are always changed or condensed. This happens with the Harry Potter novels, and of course, Lord of the Rings. So you don't want to take every single thing that's written on the page and film it. You have to adapt it. You have to condense. So right away, you're adapting just by condensing. That's the point of a screenplay adaptation. Um, and so you can argue back and forth with things that are in the novel versus what's in a film. Um, and, what they leave out, what they leave in, or what wasn't in a novel that's present in a film. This happens all the time. So I guess my point is that Dracula in particular, when you think about it, that was a series of letters. That's what that novel is a series of letters. And Coppola's version came very close to depicting that aspect of the novel by Bram Stoker. But the film that I think that really captures Dracula and the kind of vampire that he was, uh, that perhaps, how can I say it? I'm not sure really even the novel it's present, but to me, just the very nature of a vampire as being tired, century after century after century, living through and biting people's necks and being a bloodsucker. That was Nosferatu the Vampire, the Werner Herzog 1979 remake of the original 1922 version, which of course was an unofficial adaptation of the Bram Stoker novel. Now, those films came closer to a deeper understanding of what it means to be a vampire. But that theme perhaps is not really present in the Dracula Bram Stoker novel. But the point is that that's what you can do in a film adaptation: is cut deeper, aim for things that maybe the novelist that wrote a book hadn't even thought of. Both versions of Cape Fear, for example, are quite different from The Executioners and I can't remember the novelist's name now. But the thing is that it is what you take. I mean, even Scorsese's Goodfellas, for example, which is an adaptation of an autobiography, pretty much, by Henry Hill, leaves out the fact that Henry Hill had been in the service, I think, as in the army. But I mean, those are little things. I mean, like I said, when you take a film adaptation of a novel, you're going to condense it and modify it and change it. You have to, because that's just the very nature of it. It would be the same thing with a play. Of course, there have been plays that have been adapted from novels, and sometimes vice versa. And if you do a film of a play, you're also going to change things too. Like David Mamet's plays, for example. Even he knew he had to aim for something else when it came to a cinematic interpretation. So I wish people would recognize that more often. Adapting, that's what it is. You're adapting a literary work and you change it to fit your needs if you're good at what you do. That is, as a screenwriter. And of course, the director with his or her vision rather. So I'm just tired of people saying we have to do literal translations of books and put everything in that's in a book. Well, everything that's in a book may not necessarily be fantastic. A director may have a vision that corresponds with the book and then decides to just make slight changes. The Age of Innocence, also by Scorsese, in the book by Edith Wharton, Michelle Pfeiffer's hair was more of a brunette, if I'm not mistaken. So, but that is such a minor little change because most of the film follows the book. Um, anyway, in fact, I think the book of Age of Innocence, Newland Archer is in fact more of a feminist than what is shown in the film. But again, you can't include every little thing. I mean, you could, but if you did, then some novels that can run almost 700-800 pages, you'd have a mini-series, if not longer. You can't do a regular 2-3 hour film version even that covers every little aspect of a novel. It's just not meant to be done that way. You have to adapt. And those are my thoughts on it. Film adaptations. And this is Jerry Saravia of the Movies, signing off.